So today I'd like to introduce Laura Weber Caneva. I thought that's what it was, but if you say it, I know it's going to be right. So, and she will do the Weber family history.
All right. Well, thank you. Um, some of you might also know the last name Caneva if you ever shopped at the New York store in Deadwood or went to the Midnight Star. My in-laws owned the New York store and the Hub Clothiers here in town when they moved here in the 70s. So got a little bit of history on both sides. Well, today I was going to talk about just the Weber family. My great-grandparents came from Luxembourg. Um, I never knew my grandpa Weber, but my sister and I had the pleasure of knowing our great grandmother till she passed in 1988. So she kind of babysat us, let us run around in her yard, let us play bank in her desk drawers and stuff. So, I mean, it was a great growing up. We didn't have a daycare or babysitter, so it was very fun. But my grandpa Weber, he was born December 31st, 1869 in Hassel, Luxembourg. And I know there's several different families around here that also their families came from Luxembourg. Um, I think at that time people were coming to the States. They came directly to Sturgis. They didn't like travel across country and stop in Iowa and Missouri and whatever. They came directly to Sturgis. He came with his uncle, Nick Keffler, also known as Dominic. They came in 1888. Grandpa Weber was 18. He went back to Luxembourg in 1892 to marry Mariana Luxoff, and they married on March 15th, 1893. And he brought her back here directly and took her out on the prairie where she totally objected to this ugly, desolate land. So he took her to over on the Belfouche River by 4 Mile, and they rented a place there for many, many years until they moved to Sturgis in October of 1907. Um, I believe that they lived in a house that's right over here on Sherman Street, where our new barn garage for the Catholic Church is. You can see a chain link fence with the gate, and in their wedding picture, which is over here, that's where she's always told me that that house was. And my sister and I remember walking with her over there to visit somebody. We can't remember who. We were little. Um, Mariana died February 7th, 1911, following complications from a surgery in Hot Springs. She and Leonard had 4 daughters: Loretta, who was Mrs. Lawrence Cooper, Louise, Dorothy, and Clara, who all moved to California after they were grown. Leonard also owned the Key City Bar, which is where the Wells Fargo Bank is. A lot of people think he owned Leonard's place, but that was across the street. My grandmother, Anna Even, she was born March 18th, 1893. She just had a birthday. She was born in Batringen, Luxembourg. She came through Ellis Island, which we have the ship's manifest that we found. She came over on the ship, the Lapland. Um, she came during the Great Migration, so you can actually see where she came through. She always said she had a trunk and $7 in her pocket. And this is the trunk that she came with. Had her belongings. It was her chair. She said you did your business in a bucket and threw it over the side of the ship. But all her belongings were in there, and she had $7 in her pocket to get from New York to Sturgis. The reason that she came here, her aunt, who was Mrs. Nicholas Schumacher, and the uncle, they came here first, and their house was up under the viaduct. They they had a daughter, but she had passed when she was like 6 or 7. So then they would send money back to the old country to bring the next child over. The first of her sisters that came over was Margaret Comas. then Mary Wires, and then my grandmother, Anna. And then the rest kind of followed. She had a couple brothers and stuff. And there's some pictures of just, and her brother Henry came over. She had a brother, Frank. She had a sister, Gretchen Dries was her sister. Catherine, her mom, was able to come over after her father passed. So then all the family was here. My grandmother was 18 years old when she came. I remember her saying her first job was in the Charles Hotel, which was over on Main Street, and she felt so out of place because she spoke no English. She only spoke Luxembourg, and she said, "I know that all they did was laugh at me." And so, but she said, I learned English and, moved on. If you ever do any history looking on Ellis Island, it is pretty interesting, the stuff that you can find about your family. We didn't find the exact one that I had found many years ago where it declared the $7 that she had in her pocket, but she had to declare an occupation and she put down servant, which I thought was kind of funny. Leonard and Anna had one son, who was my grandfather, Pete. He married my grandma, Anna, or Rita Kaiser. And my grandma Rita's family also came here from Ireland and Germany, but they landed in Mankato, Minnesota, which is where my sister and I both went to college, unknowing that that's where they had family. Grandma remembered going there to get glasses and do different things, but her dad was in the cavalry at Fort Meade until he was discharged, and then they lived up on Main Street. So my grandmother, Anna Fruth, who we always called her grandmother, the rest of the family called her Ma, and she's the one who purchased the land where our ranch is currently. And she purchased that on May 19th, 1925. So May 19th will be our 100-year anniversary. So that's pretty cool. And actually today here we have 6 generations. So I have my aunt, my sister and me, my son, and my grandson. So we have 6 generations for that place. But this is an old picture. My grandpa was the dairy guy, and they had a dairy for many, many years, and that's where the original house is right now. And our 2 little barns, they're a little bigger now. Not as many lilacs and trees around. But she also owned from over to Sherman Street on the north and to Nellie Street on the west, but then sold that off to become Weber Drive and Paisley Terrace. So then after Grandpa Weber passed in 1930 from a long illness, she married Henry Fruth, but I don't really know much about that side, so I'll have to get together with Terry Herman someday and find out that family history. And there's our hill when we had red cows. Now we have black cows. Then we also do our fun Christmas display. It kind of started out as a joke between my dad and me and Mary, probably. When Mary graduated from college, it was in December of 1989 or 88. Was it 88? 89. And they came out for graduation. Well, there were 2 neighborhoods who had huge Christmas displays, Mary Circle and Broad Street. So we took them driving around to look at all these Christmas lights. Well, there was a giant poinsettia on this balcony, and it was like a Southern style balcony with the columns and white. And my dad goes, "Oh, I just love that poinsettia." And he goes, "Do you think you could draw me one that we could make?" Well, before we came home for Christmas break, he had already built a poinsettia that was about this big, and it looked like a blob. But he had it on our house. We grew up here up on the corner of Sherman and 3rd. and he had it on the house by the mailbox, and it just looked horrible. He tore it apart after Christmas. But then when I got home, I drew him a pattern, and we made one that was probably 9 feet across. It was giant. And he ended up winning the KBHB Christmas Spirit of Christmas Award, and they gave him $300. And that started our Christmas light and garland addiction. So then after that, it was just, well, what can we make next? And what should we build? Because we enjoyed it. And it was many generational. My grandma spent many hours sitting out there on a stool wrapping lights and tape, and my aunt, my dad, my sister, and I, and Mary and Carol and I keep it going now. And, I know many people thought it was going to go away, but we enjoyed it just as much as Dad did. So, yeah, we have about a little over 15,000 lights, we figured. And there's over 75 pieces here at the ranch, but I have some, Carol has some, Mary has some. We made some for many people around town, so. But I guess that does it. If you have any questions, I'll try and answer them. Just don't make them difficult. So this was Leonard's Bar. That's like the only picture that we really had, where the Wells Fargo is now. And then we found my grandmother's birth certificate, and Mary put a AI translation app on her phone to decipher it, translate it. So it was pretty interesting. She always told me she didn't have a middle name, and come to find out her middle name was Lena. And then her baptism record when she was baptized in Luxembourg. And she would tell me stories about going into Luxembourg City, carrying potatoes or needlework or stuff that they had done to sell to make money. And then those were some postcards that we have, probably 15 or 20 that were sent back and forth, and they're all in Luxembourg, so of course we can't read them. Luxembourg is a cross between German and French. And so the translator Mary had was kind of struggling with some of the words, but some of them we'd read. They said, "We hope you're enjoying, or that you found the life you had hoped you would find in South Dakota," and everything. Yeah, we're gonna probably translate more of them, but. And then these were just the ship's manifest Mary found. I am not the computer person, she is. And then just some of the different postcards, they were pictures of family events, or needlework is the bottom one. There were some that were like of a wedding, one was a funeral procession, and then just different buildings and stuff, so. And then that was her aunt and uncle's house up under the viaduct, and then her mother and her aunt.
That house is still there.
I think so. Yeah. Yeah, and then grandmother and her sisters. And then up here, I just have a few other pictures, and we had some whiskey bottles that were Grandpa Weber's, some milk bottles from when they had the dairy.
So who had the dairy?
Grandmother, Anna, and Grandpa, I think, right?
What is this?
That is the picture from their wedding day. So in the white dress with the crown, that's my grandmother Anna. This is actually the bracelet that she's wearing in that picture. This is actually her wedding ring, but my grandma Rita had 2 other diamonds added from her bank pin or her bank pin added to it, so that's her wedding ring and her bracelet. And then all her family and stepdaughters. Mary and I always get a kick out of these 2 ladies. And that's the aunt, Mrs. Schumacher, and we're not sure who that is. But then Margaret and John Comas and Mary and Pete Wires. We're not exactly sure who this is, but the gentleman there, I think, is the first Mrs. Weber's brother, Michael Grogan, who went by Mish. They called him Uncle Mish. And I think he was the best man. So,
The lady on the far thing that's holding the bottle up, I think that is Elizabeth Comus. That's what we was told in that picture. She was married to. Well, she was married. She would have been Margaret's mother-in-law. So, and she was right now Elizabeth, and I can't think of great grandpa's name was, but yeah, I mean that's what we was told. So
and that could be because they all came from that same area.
yeah, I'm Carol Odie Coven Comus. My grandma was Margaret, and Dan and Pat. We're all cousins. So yeah, some of the Comuses.
Yeah, just a few of them. Could I? Are we on?
Yes.
I would just like to thank your family for all the years and hours of pleasure and a form of celebrating Christmas to me at its finest. And I'm so glad that it hasn't stopped.
35 years that we've been doing it.
Mary, do you still make them, or Laura, do you still make them?
We haven't made any new ones because it takes a lot of time just to replace burned out light bulbs and.
I think the last one we made.
Pastor Kevin Jensen. Yeah. Laura, I'm interested in hearing about the church life. Saw the baptismal certificate, and can you share a little bit with that?
Well, they were raised Catholic, and we've all stayed in the Catholic, as you well know. He keeps trying to get me to join the Lutheran Church. But yeah, she was raised Catholic in Luxembourg, and I believe Grandpa Weber was as well. In fact, if you go up to St. Martin's Chapel, there's a lot of the stained glass work and different things that have Dominic Keffler's name or Nick Keffler, Mrs. Henry Fruth, but we think that's the first one, which is actually this gal here. And the third one over, she was the first Mrs. Fruth. And, you know, our grandmother did a lot with the church, and over here at St. Francis, we all sat together growing up sitting with our grandparents and stuff. So, but everybody was Catholic as far as I know.
The Fruth Hotel or Motel, is that part of them? The Fruth Hotel?
Yes, so my grandmother married. I'm going to tell my coworkers you didn't think I was loud enough. When Grandpa Weber passed, she married Henry Fruth, and we found on a picture there was the dates written on the back, and they were married almost the same day, but like 20, 30 years apart. But we can't confirm that. But yeah, so they had the Fruth Hotel, which was where the bank is now, First Interstate. And then there was an old livery barn across the alley. And on that was 3 apartments and our grandmother lived in one, rented the other 2. Then our house was on the corner of 3rd and Sherman. And then there was another rental house she had behind. So she had that pretty much that whole block. And she would go every day to her house, and then at night she'd go stay at the ranch with my grandparents, just help out, do whatever. But yeah, she was, you know, when she married him, that was his legacy, was the Fruth Hotel. So,
Laura, you said he came from Luxembourg to here directly. What was the connection here? Was there a reason? the family already here?
So when I went to Ellis Island with my daughter in 2017, we went to Ellis Island. I would have loved to have spent more time because I remember grandmother telling me stories about, coming over on the ship, coming into this big building, and you were run just like cattle. And when we were there, Hurricane Sandy had done a lot of damage to that, but it was exactly as she described it to me. And they didn't have a lot of stuff open that we could do any research on. But a lot of those people that came from Luxembourg had family here or in different areas across the United States, and they'd send money back and bring the rest of the family. And that's what, the Schumachers sent money back and brought Margaret Comus over. Margaret worked, and then they brought Mary Wires over, and then they all put their money together and brought my grandmother over. And I mean, it was just a family thing to get people here. And I think in Bear Butte Valley, there's a lot of Luxembourg heritage there that, you just don't really know. But back in those days, I mean, you didn't just hop in your car and, run to Rapid to visit your grandmother. They just didn't really do that. They did get together at times, but, it was a big family, as you can tell. Hopefully that answered it, Mark.
Keep one close for you.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, you mentioned Dominic Keffler. He was my great granddad. So that was,
I thought he did not have children.
well, I thought it was my great. That's what they always go me back to, was Dominic.
Okay.
There was four brothers.
Okay. Yeah, we don't know much about that Kuffler side, but I had been told they thought he was the bachelor uncle that didn't have children. Well, I don't know. That was just what I had heard one time when I'd asked someone. But it'd be interesting to get together and, put all our stories together and see what we came up with.
I don't have a question, Laura, but I would love to have everyone who is related to the Weber family. I don't want to put you on the spot, ha ha ha. But I would like to have you raise your hand so we know who all here is from the heritage of the Weber family.
Great number.
I'm going off of the Weber history and going to the John and Margaret Comus. They're right up there on the left. Yep. And you're talking about the church in town, but I'm pretty sure my grandparents were in the Bear Butte Valley Catholic Church. The church is still out there, but
Immaculate Conception.
yeah, Immaculate Conception. What a name, huh?
Yeah.
And my dad was one of 6 that was born to them. And our family, me and my brother and my mom, Helen Comus, she's still alive. She's 97. We own the family farm that's been in our family, the homestead, since 1904. So.
My dad and Pat's dad was Joe Comus, brother to John, and I do know the great grandfather. I looked it up in the book because I couldn't remember his name. Was William Comus, and John and Margaret were married at the Catholic Church in the Valley, and so was my folks. So was Wayne and I, and Pat and everything else. So we were all married out there before it closed in 1970. Could have been 84, yeah. So.
And when my grandpa John passed away, he passed away fairly young, like in his 50s. Margaret moved into town and lived here on Pine Street. And she went to Mass at the Catholic Church twice a day, I'm sure. She walked, and she got hit on the street in front of the church, and that kind of disabled her for the rest of her life. But she lived into her 90s also. So.
Well, I'm Clint Jolly. Loretta Weber, who was in the back row there, was married to Lawrence Cooper, who was the brother of my grandmother Waldman. So, but as kids, we lived on Weber's Hill. And I think we were probably part of generations that lived on Weber's Hill. We were there all summer, and we sleigh rode up there all winter. And one time I was up there on the cliff with a bunch of kids, and I found my mother's name scratched in the sand up there. So, and Pete put up with us. I remember my Aunt Loretta giving me a hard time one day because the kids were rolling in the alfalfa. And so she came to me.
Well, I'm not with your family, but we grew up right next to you. We lived on Sherman Street, right below, on the other side of Sherman Street where Paisley Terrace is. And my folks moved in there in 1933. So we grew up watching your cattle graze up there. And my grandmother lived on the little house just across, just on Sherman Street. And then we were back toward the alley. And she would take my sister and I walking whenever the cows weren't up there. We would go walking through there. And so it's just like old home. And my dad was quite a historian, and so he was always taking pictures. And he took pictures of when they started Paisley Terrace, said it was in the 1960s. I can't remember what year, but I'm thinking it's 1964. And he shows it right, right where it was. And it was very interesting to live there.
More questions? Oh, sure. I was going to have a break for a while.
Wait till you got as far away as possible. Okay. I want to know more about your dad, Laura. My connection with your father, of course, was through the Postal Service, and I'd like to know how he got started working for the post office. And I had great admiration for him.
So Dad was in the postal part in the Army. Is that right? I think. And then when he came back here, he worked at Dorn's grocery store and then got into the post office. He did everything from the ground up, was a carrier, a clerk, supervisor, postmaster. He retired in 1992. Yeah, he did a lot. He traveled with the post office. He was in Pier for like 6 or 8 months. He loved that because he went fishing every night after work. Caught some salmon, caught some walleye, and yeah, he was a great guy. Many people enjoyed when he came to their post office and everything. So yeah, it was nice when he retired. Then, we got to spend all the time with him. I worked at night, so I'd go spend all day with him and hang out and then go to work in the evening or go golfing or whatever we wanted to do. So it was fun.
Any stories, remembrances of the ship coming over and how long it took, and did they get sick? And
reach back into my brain. I just remember her saying it was very crowded. It was a very full ship. I don't remember if she said she got sick or anything. Had it been me, yes, I would have been sick and just hanging over the railing the whole time. But I just remember her saying how crowded it was. But she couldn't speak to anybody unless they spoke Luxembourg. So, I think she pretty much stayed to herself. But she sat on that. That was her chair, too. You didn't pay for a seat like you do now, or like if anybody watches Yellowstone 1923, she just came over on that ship. grandmother didn't have a bed like that or anything. You know, that was where she sat and she slept. And yeah. And I know she had taken food with her because, you know, they didn't feed you really. But I just knew it was a long trip. She was glad when she got here. And I don't know how long it took. I didn't see on the manifest like start date, end date, or how long the train took to get from New York to here. And we didn't see any of those dates.
Did the train bring her all the way here?
Mm-hmm. Yep. She came over in 1910 was when she came here, but your grandma came first.
I'm falling down.
You're falling down, Ross. Yeah, because your grandma came first. So if that place was, would you say 1914? 1904. That was probably just, you know, shortly after she came here because she was the first one, other than the aunt and uncle. And then Mary Wires.
A bit older than John, so it was
Quite a scandal, huh?
John was born here out, Comus was born out in the stone house that Brooks have along the road. And when Grandma come here, Margaret, she went after John as a husband. And she was like 7 years older than him because she wanted an American-born husband. Although she was an immigrant, she wanted an American-born, and she went after John. And it did work, yes. So that was, you know, that was very, very interesting. Yeah.
That trait running the Comus women, or
My dad, Joe, there was 6 kids of them in the family, and Dad would sit with Grandpa on the steps of the porch, and he would tell him all kind of stories. Well, when we was growing up, that's when the tape recorders come out, and we tried to tape Dad, but every time we put the tape on, he'd quit talking to us and stuff, and he wouldn't talk. So he had so many stories, and we lost them all because, you know, wasn't smart enough to write them down that fast. We were just kids and stuff. But and Dad had died at 67. He died as a young man, and so did John. I don't know what. Your dad was in his 50s, so we lost our father fairly young and stuff. So, but it was, and Anna Steves was the sister, and she says, "Well, I never heard any of those stories." Well, she was in the kitchen helping Grandma, and Dad was out on the step listening to Grandpa. So there was a lot of different stories everybody had heard. So.
Yeah, nobody wanted to go to the homestead in the country because Grandpa John died in his 50s. My dad died in his 50s out there. My brother Rick he was in his 40s from a accident. My brother says, "Well, I don't think I want to go out there. This isn't very good for the men in the family."
you know, we make kind of fun of running around with the microphone, which is great. But that's exactly why we do this, is we record these. They can be seen by everybody now. And it's difficult for the microphone if we had just one in here. So that I'm glad that you guys are cooperating. But it's important. I think those stories are important, and that's part of what the Arts Council is trying to do here, is to gather these stories. It might not be your family. Today it is. But the next one, and we invite anyone who has a family history that they'd like to share, to record it. please get in touch with Richard or myself or anybody on the Arts Council. We'll certainly make arrangements, and we're always looking for a program, so please do that. More questions? Commercial's over.
I don't necessarily have a question from my mom, but I have a question for who here. I know you spoke, you were up there and you saw your mother's name in the rock. Who here has etched their name into the rock up there?
I have not etched my name, but my son-in-law has put he and my daughter and all three of his kids on the rocks up there in the sandstone.
Well, we want to thank the Webbers for all their work in putting all this together, so we greatly appreciate it. Thank you.